Changing consumer attitudes or altering consumer attitudes an important marketing strategy. Here, marketers they try that the brands they strengthen their image and they maintain their image and they do not get trapped into the competitive strategy of luring these consumers to switch to their brands. And here we need to understand that in contrast to it, there are many brands, leading brands in many different product categories. Like Tide is one of the market leader. We have Nike in athletic shoes. So consumers they have strong beliefs about these brands or products, whereas competitors what they do they try to alter consumers' attitude towards these brands. But then consumers they frequently revisit the evidence, and when they find the information confusing they remain loyal to these brands. So now we need to understand that there are two primary strategies for changing consumer attitudes. Number one, changing an offering's overall image or referring to a specific product attribute. And let's look into the first strategy, that is changing beliefs about the product. So we know that the strategy of changing belief in order to change attitude concentrate of changing beliefs and perceptions about the brand itself. So this strategy basically starts with changing people's belief and perceptions about the brand itself. So I think this is the most common form of advertising appeal, and advertisers are constantly reminding us that their products are more or better or best in terms of some important attributes. And the information that is aimed at changing an attitude that must be extremely compelling, and this message must be repeated many times if we want to come overcome people's natural resistance to abandoning established attitudes. So to change or alter these beliefs about the product, companies they have to come up with this strategy, which can basically it's not easy to change the beliefs or perception of people. So they are talking about that you have to come with a very appealing, a very compelling, very convincing kind of advertising, and then you have to repeat that advertising over and over again so that you can alter their beliefs about the products. Now this is basically an advertisement in which they are trying to alter the belief of people, those who think that avocado it has too much fat. So they're basically trying to tell them that relax, it's a good fat. So they're basically trying to alter their beliefs regarding this avocado. The next is the changing brand image. So this is a strategy in which companies what they do is they try to alter consumers' overall assessment of the brand, and marketers they employ this approach by using inclusive promotional statements designed to set their brands apart. So there's an example like this Kraft Miracle Whip that people they use in their sandwiches. They claim that using their product makes much tastier turkey sandwiches, and to support this claim they add other points into the advertisement, like the Miracle Whip it is more tastier and it has half the fat as compared to mayonnaise sandwiches. Now let's look into changing beliefs about competing brands. So companies they try to alter people's belief about their competitors. So another attitude change strategy involves changing consumer beliefs about competitors, brands, or product categories. And we need to understand that there are many different advertisements in which companies they go about comparative advertising or two-sided message. Let's look into the examples like this figure. It calls for basically, it refutes the notion that more pills they relieve pain more effectively than fewer pills, and it is designed to establish unfavorable attitudes towards Tylenol and this product LV. They're saying that you don't need to eat a lot of pills in a day, rather you just take two pills, and these pills they are so strong that you are relieved from the pain for the entire day. And similarly we have another advertisement which is basically of Lysol. And Lysol is basically saying that whenever you use these tissue papers or paper towels, they basically spread germs, whereas Lysol whips, they kill the germs. And here we need to understand that this uh, LV ad was basically a comparative advertising, whereas this Lysol advertisement is a two-sided message. So, multi-attribute attitude models, they portray that the consumer's attitude is a function of the assessment of the object's prominent features. So, all these models, they examine the work of consumer attitudes in terms of selected product attributes or beliefs. And first, we discuss the attitude towards the object model and the use of product attribute in changing consumers' attitudes and developing new products. And after that, we discuss the attitude towards behavior model, the theory of reasoned action, and the theory of trying to consume, and the attitude towards ad model. So we look at them by one. First of all, we are going to discuss the attitude towards the object model. And we need to understand that the attitude towards the object model, it maintains a consumer evaluation of the product. And we are saying that this consumer evaluation of the product is basically a function of two things. Number one, the extent to which a product has or they lack each of a given set of attributes. So we draw down these attributes and then we see how much of these attributes are present or they're lacking in the product, and then the importance of each of these attributes to the consumers, and not just that the attribute is present or it is lacking, but also how much important a certain attitude is to the consumers. So in other words, we can say that the consumers, they generally they have favorable attitude towards those brands, that they believe that they have better performance on the attributes than those which are lacking those attributes, and then they have unfavorable attitude towards those which are basically they feel that they are not meeting the criteria. So in a study which was done to illustrate this model, uh, 96 marketing students, they rated three different brands of smartphones: iPhone, BlackBerry, and Android, along the seven attribute list. And we look into the table 6.6 for that. And these ratings, they present that the students believe regarding the extent to which each brand possesses a specific attribute. Students then indicated the level of importance of attached to the each attribute, and then subsequently they multiplied the importance weights by the rating for each phone. And for example, long battery life emerged as the most important attribute in a cell phone, and 3.77 out of total 5 possible points. And the iPhone scored higher on the attribute than the other two phones. Now let's look into this 6.6 table and see. Now they are comparing three different brands based on this. The now in this particular picture, they are comparing iPhone and BlackBerry, and the attributes are basically the most important attribute is long battery life, then high resolution screen, voice activated commands, and so on. And now what they're doing, like they have noted down the attribute importance, and then this importance is basically multiplied with the presence of the attribute and the presence of this attribute into the importance of the attribute. So it is basically they have multiplied this. And now we need to understand that marketers, they use attitude towards object model in developing promotions designed to change consumer attitudes in favor of the brands advertised. They do so by adding new product attributes, changing consumer perceptions of attributes, and also developing new products after reaching consumers' preference. So we need to understand the positive attitude towards brand. They basically help brand with extensions. Now this Adidas, because it is a very renowned brand for the athletic footwear, and it is one of the market leader. So it has such a good reputation, and people, they have so much positive attitude about this brand that they basically come up with this sweat control, uh, these deodorants, and it's basically they are saying reinventing sweat control, 100% aluminum free, the first absorbent deodorant for women. So they already had a positive image for female sportswear and female footwear, sports footwear. So now, because of that, they're capitalizing on it, these positive attitudes, and they're introducing these deodorants for females, those who exercise or those who are involved in sports. So before we move to attitude towards behavior model, let's discuss that adding an attribute. We need to understand that adding a product or brand attribute, it means that either adding an attribute that was previously ignored by the brand, or that represents improvement or innovation. For example, to add a previously ignored or unknown attribute or benefit, an ad might point out that yogurt has more potassium than bananas, and then a comparison of yogurt and banana can enhance the attitude towards the yogurt among the consumer who wish to take more potassium. So, by emphasizing on or by comparing it with something which already contains the attribute, increases the message that is being delivered to the consumer. Now let's look into the changing the perceived importance of attitude. Here we need to understand that when we talked about consumer segmentation, we talked about benefit segmentations, and many a times we divide the target market based on the type of benefit that consumers they are seeking. We say it as benefit sought. Now we need to understand that the brands they provide consumers with different benefits, and they position their products accordingly. For example, there are many companies which are coming up with the headache remedies like Tylenol, aspirin, and most of these companies they have different formula, and they basically try to sell these multiple versions of the same product that provide somewhat different narrowly defined benefit in order to maintain or gain the market share. So here we need to understand that these marketers, they're smart enough to identify niches or to divide target market. For example, Colgate, total it provides a 12-hour germ fighting, and Colgate Max French, it wipes off bad breath from our mouth, and Colgate Sensitive Pro Relief is for the people those who have sensitive gums. And some companies they have discovered product attributes that consumer pay little or no attention to, and feature them in the advertisement. And that is basically they're trying to tell consumer, teach consumer that there are other benefits that they can also seek from the product. Um, Now, let's look into developing new products. Marketers they often use the attribute towards object model during development of new products, and consider the following hypothetical example that Tropicana company is planning to add a new item in its product line, and the company market researchers identified four attributes as the key determinant in consumer attitude towards the orange juice. And amount of pulp, that is one attribute, the degree of sweetness, strength of the flavor and color. Then Tropicana conducted a three-stage study. So company identified four different attributes. That is number one, the amount of pulp, degree of sweetness, strength of flavor, and color. And then they conducted this three-stage research. Now, using the scales, the researcher they asked consumers who drank orange juice regularly to describe their ideal juice among the four attributes. And in the second stage, what they did that realistically, Tropicana could not produce the ideal juice because it could not offer it at a competitive price. And instead, the respondent they rated a concept juice representing a product that Tropicana could sell. The concept juice was similar to ideal one, but not identical. So Tropicana made an actual new orange juice which consumer tasted and rated. So it's basically a study which was conducted, and in this study, first what they did was like they asked consumers, and they came up with four different attributes, and they asked a question from the people who drink orange juice, and what is their ideal juice. Once they have identified the ideal juice, they came across the fact that the Tropicana is not identical to the ideal, and now they came up with a new Tropicana orange juice which consumer they tasted and they rated. Now let's look at this advertisement. It is highlighting the importance of attribute, and they're saying like real fruit must be packed in real fruit juice. So wouldn't you rather have your fruit in 100% fruit juice? So this is an advertisement by Doll Fruit Bowls. And now let's look into this semantic scale, differential scale, which was developed for rating the attributes of Tropicana juice. And the company, they came up with this figure which shows that compared with the ideal and actual product, had too little pulp and was far too sweet, but the flavor of both the products were nearly the same. Regarding color, it appeared that the although Tropicana did not match the ideal or the product concept, the company improved the color in actual product by making it closer to the ideal ones, and these findings indicate that the Tropicana must change the actual product so that it matches consumer preferences by making it less sweet and adding more pulp. Now let's look into the next model, that is the attitude towards behavior model. And this model basically captures the individual's attitude towards behaving or acting with respect to the object rather than the attitude towards the object itself. So here we need to understand that using this attitude towards behavior model to understand consumer may sometimes be more useful than using the attitude towards object model. And for instance, a consumer who's looking for a new car might like Lexus cars. It means they have positive attitude towards the object, but not ready or willing to buy an expensive Lexus uh, car. That is a negative attitude towards the behavior associated with the object. Companies study examine consumer attitude towards the act or behavior of shopping online and reveal that these attitudes reflected nine desired benefits like effectiveness and modern. There's a purchase convenience, and there's abundance of information. It's multi-form and safety, service quality, the delivery speed, home-page design, selection freedom, and the name familiarity. The last topic that we are going to cover today is the theory of reasoned action model, which is known as TRA. And this theory basically incorporates the cognitive, affective, and cognitive components. And additionally, it holds that researcher must measure the subjective norms. And these subjective norms, they are basically a person's feeling as to what relevant others, like their family, their friends, their roommates, and co-workers, think of the action of the person contemplates. So that is, would they support the anticipated action or not? For example, if a student they wanted to get a tattoo, but first consider whether her parents or their classmates they will approve or disapprove their this action. So her consideration of others or his consideration of others' opinion is basically her subjective norm or his subjective norm. So two factors that underlie the subjective norms are basically the normative beliefs that the individual attributes to the relevant others, and the individual's motivation to comply with the preference of the relevant. For instance, the subjective norm of the student who's basically contemplating getting a tattoo consists of following answers like uh, who are her relatives or his relatives, like parents and colleagues, class fellows, what are her beliefs about how each relevant other would respond to his or her tattoo, and to what extent complying with preference of relevant others play an important role in his or her decision making, And in other words, is he or she sufficiently motivated to defer to the relevant others or not? So it's basically when people they are behaving, they take into either they are taking into account the importance and of the relevant others or not, or they are considering them in their decisions or not. Now let's look into this diagram of simplified version of theory of reason action. It talks about beliefs that the behavior leads to certain outcomes, and then the evaluation of these outcomes that leads to attitude towards the behavior, and that attitude leads towards the intention, and finally the behavior. And the belief that specific reference think I should or should not perform the behavior, which is basically the subjective norms, and motivation to comply with the specific reference. These two basically compose the subjective norms that leads to the intention and finally to the behavior. Okay, now we have a question for today. It's our activity. Now use the theory of reason and action to describe your attitude towards your college, university when deciding on which school to attend.